you got recorded. So got it. Right, okay. So basically next week we'll be doing Boxgrove Man, and we'll be doing Piltdown Man forgery as well. And if anyone's got any prehistoric classes that they want to us to cover anywhere in Britain or around the world, we're doing the obvious ones like Callahallish and Hebrides, and we'll be doing sites in Cornwall and Orkney and Stonehenge and Star-Car, and we'll be looking at the Swiss villages around the margins. All those types of things we'll be looking at, and we'll even be going to prehistory of Kazakhstan. It's mainly looking at prehistory from a very deep perspective, which I hope Jessica will carry that on today. So that's good. Don't forget the monies will be due after next week, so we're trying to get all that sorted. And it's just basically trying to get to grips with an area of archaeology that we can put a lot into, really, and I'll probably leave it with this statement in a way that whenever you go to a castle, for example, it guides you to what the wall you're looking at means and when it was built and who built it. But it doesn't actually tell you about the lives of the people who actually built it. It doesn't actually tell you how long that wall really had a function and all the other things like that. So when we look at prehistory, that's the type of thing that we'll be looking at. And remember, prehistory isn't just about a cave with artifacts in. It's about the larger hinterland that cave represents. For example, in prehistory, we've got so little evidence, even in regards to the Iron Age. So what we've got to look at is try to build up a picture as Time Team would have done. And that's exactly what we're doing with prehistory. So before I go, I would like to know if anyone wants to ask me anything, and I'll be going off into the sunset to get a load of supplies. Is anything you want to ask me anything before I go?
Please.
Go on, Del.
Yes, please. When is this, or is it between all the classes? Is Jess going to base her stuff on what you were doing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or is it a different day?
No, just basis what we're doing now today. So
right, so that's what we've got to look forward to.
Yeah, you've got a lot to look forward.
Great.
There's a lot. There's in fact, on Tuesday, I asked everybody on Tuesday, because we've got quite a sizable online class on Tuesday. I said, do you want me to do the chronology of prehistory in any old order? And they all said no. We want you to do it in a constructive order from lower, middle, upper Paleolithic, all the way into Mesolithic, Neolithic, Bronze Age, and Iron Age, and that's exactly the way we're going to do it. It means that we're probably not going to do causewayed enclosures for about 7-8 months. It means that we're going to do Pont Newydd Cave in the next few weeks. It means that we're going to do Cheddar Man and Kent Cavern in the next few weeks. And we'll be visiting some areas of continental and worldwide archaeology as well.
Right.
So, and also the other thing as well is those that have got their prehistoric James Dyer books need to get them back out of the closet. And also what we are going to do is we're going to make Ancient Britain James Dyer books available. It's a textbook that even though we disagree with lots of it in there, it's got some really nice pictures, which would be a good aid. And that
I was just going to ask, how can we get hold of one?
Basically, we're going to be getting hold of a load of copies. They're not available on Amazon anymore. We've just had a look. They're available on Amazon for about £100. So we can get hold of them a lot cheaper than that. So there'll be a £5 each. And basically, Jessica can find out how many of the James Dyer books that are needed at the end. And I know Anne's got one.
Yes, please.
If you want one, Del, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if, Bill, you've got one, Ancient Britain by James Dyer?
Hang on a second. I've got one, definitely.
Well, you want one?
Yeah, I got one. Oh, what is it? Keep talking, keep talking.
All right, so anything you want to ask me, Anne, before I go?
That's it, isn't it? That's the one, isn't it?
Hang on, Anne, shut up, let Bill talk.
Yeah, that's the one. James Dyer. James Dyer. That's the one. Yeah, I got it. And before I go off, Carl, one very pertinent question. Apart from feeding the sheep, what are you doing there?
He lives there.
Pardon?
I live here. I gotta build. I'm meant to be starting building a
You want a
roundhouse.
boat?
You're
What?
still building a roundhouse,
You
you?
look as though you're on a boat fishing.
In the Irish Sea.
Oh, there's 4 acres of land here with like 6 sheep, 2 goats, 7 ducks, 2 turkeys, 40 chickens,
My
mice,
God.
we've got
40
field mice,
chickens.
foxes,
So he's an egg
kites,
man.
birds of prey,
And Michelle.
owls. There's a big statue of Lloyd George. Everything's here.
Well.
He's going to be an egg man.
The mind
Oh, and
boggling.
everyone wants eggs. Yeah.
I
Well,
can't wait to get those eggs again. They were
Del,
fantastic.
yeah, they're starting to lay again. So somehow, Jessica, what we're gonna have to do, we're gonna have to get some eggs to you on a Friday, so you can get them to Del for the Thursday.
Okay,
So,
Carl.
Del, they last really fresh for 2 weeks anyway. So we get you them fresh on, Jessica on.
They're absolutely beautiful.
Good.
We'll have to get her one of those egg box things. You know, just like, well.
Do you know? But by the way, it's not true that me and Jessica are having a sordid relationship. It's not happening because Jessica's. Can I ask you a question, guys? Right? Would it be old? Is it correct English to say Jessica's old enough to be my daughter or young enough to be my daughter? What is the difference between saying Jessica's young enough to be my
I'd
daughter?
say
You're
young
old
enough.
enough for her to be your daughter.
So is
I'd
it
say
correct?
young
to say-
enough.
Oh, and happy birthday for yesterday, Carl.
Exactly. Now she's definitely too young, old. Yeah, no, the point is being old enough to be my daughter is the same as young enough to be my daughter. Surely it means the same thing.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think it's young enough.
Yeah, I think it's younger because if you say older, it might be older than you. Are we overcomplicating this?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Do you know what? I need to, Jessica. I need to put this on record, and I need to go. So,
Are you 46 now?
leave my age out of it, Bill. Bill, have you asked your questions? Yeah, you done that? Yeah.
I've
Del?
asked a question, yeah, thank you.
And ask me a
Oh, I
question. and
just
I'll go.
wanted to know, you got a note, you sent me a note to say pay the next £100. So, and then that'll be the end for the Chichester group at Chichester.
Yeah, I do, but and I
Okay.
sort of, yeah, your money situation is at the wall. Yeah, 100. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, and being asked for money from everywhere, including Zoom.
Oh God, yeah.
And yeah, the £100. Yes, that'd be great. Get that over to me.
Yeah.
And Bill, you've got to get some
Yeah.
more shekels over to me.
I'll do that.
Adele,
That's
I
another
need to
10.
know how much I pay for the minibus.
You'll never know that.
We're going down. My wife's got connections down in Chichester because she went to college there.
oh, so you are definitely still going on it.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Jess, we need to make a phone call.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I don't need accommodation.
Right.
Right,
'Cause
okay.
We've already booked
Is
somewhere.
it just going to be you?
It's just going to be me on the thing, but we're going down as a family.
On the bus.
No.
Oh,
I might come with you on the Friday because Jessie's in school.
Right.
And I might, depending on the geography of things, because Jane knows where the places you're staying, because it used to be a local.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically, if you're going past where we're staying, and I can't remember where it is, or Emsworth. Emsworth.
Oh, well, it would help if we know the precise spelling.
Yeah,
it would.
because she'll either drop me off, or if it's on route, pick
We've
me up on our...
sorted out the time, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't worry. We'll sort
yeah.
it.
Yeah, we sorted out.
yeah, don't worry about it until you get the letter.
Del, for the time being, Del, send us a 50 quid deposit and we'll see what else you owe, all right?
Lovely.
That's
Thanks.
yeah, that's
Great.
right.
Send us, Del, send us 50 quid over, and then I'll have a word with Del about that little woman, Jessica, about the.
Okay, is that it?
Right, over to you, Jess. I'm gonna go out. Bye, folks. Have a great time with Jess, and make sure I'll have a shave. Bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year, and Bill, thanks for phoning me.
Yay.
earlier.
Oh,
Bye.
Carl,
Yeah, go on. Jess,
could
I'm
you,
gonna go. I'm gonna get some stuff.
can you enable the host so I can share screen?
All right, yeah, I could do that. Right, yeah. So it would help, wouldn't it? You know, if you. Right, okay. All right, Dan. I'm
Perfect. Thank you, Carl.
Over to you, right? We're in complete gay abandon, right? And me and Del and Bill are totally gay, right? And I'll see you soon. Oh, by the way, Jessica, work out. You're back there in Bridgend next week, and we need to get numbers in the class up as soon as possible. Take care.
Yes.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Gone quiet.
Yeah, I was thinking of leaving these leaflets I've made, or I might make better ones. I was thinking giving them a pile to put on the desk, at least on the counter, you know.
Yeah, that'll work because it'll gain people's interest, and it seems like we've got people's interest in some sort of way just by being there.
Yeah.
If
so
you
maybe
could put them down into the old castle as well, where we were meeting.
Yeah.
Because they've turned it into a bit of a hub. I know it's, you know, the upstairs room is out of action at the moment because they're using it for storage.
Yeah.
But as I said to Anne a couple of weeks ago, they're keen to get groups like us in.
Yeah.
But they've only got that little corner, and I know it wasn't suitable for people wearing hearing aids.
Yeah.
But they're keen to turn the place into a hub, so they'd support, you know,
Well,
what we're doing.
But it's what we want, and we tried that little corner, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah, it doesn't.
The cover watch does work.
Look,
Yes.
we'll network with them, and we'll give them some leaflets, and you know, you know, we might be able to reciprocate. Maybe one day could have a meal there or something. I don't know if they do meals, you know. Just have a good relationship with them, you know.
Yeah, they're not doing meals at the moment.
No, well, anyway, okay then.
Yeah,
no, that's fine. Thank you, Del. Just wanted to ask before we get into it, is did everyone have a nice Christmas and New Year? And do you have any news this week? So, Del?
Fantastic Christmas and New Year, although the Saturday, New Year's Day, and the Sunday, I contracted a stomach bug.
Oh, no.
So I was vomiting for about a day and a half. But the good news from it is, when I went to Slimming World on Wednesday, I lost 7
Slimming
pounds.
World? Come on, Del.
I used to love being poorly whenever I went to Slim World, which sounds really bad, but you know you're going to lose a lot of that week.
Said, "Oh, will you give me a kiss so I can catch it?"
Yeah, my mum used to say things like that. Yeah, it always gives you a silver lining, I think, to being poorly. That's fantastic.
Yeah. No, my news I've already mentioned about the plaque, which I didn't know about.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Definitely be worth seeing more and see if we can. Yeah, because it sounds really interesting. Thank you, Del.
Yeah, because I can imagine, especially with BCBC, Bridgend Council, they are more sort of likely, oh, that's a derelict building now, it's unsafe, we'll pull it down, and then the plaque disappears. And it's historic because it's recognising someone who they thought was going to be the next king, but didn't. So it's quite rare.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it should be protected, especially for the future, for anyone that wants to look back on the past. And just like we sit there every lesson and think, oh, I wish I could know more, or think about all the things that we could have lost, that we've lost, that we could have had. Yes. And I think protecting things like that, it's almost like we don't want the future to go through what we had to. So we try and protect as much as we can. So yeah, I think that's definitely fantastic. Thank you for that, Del. And I think something with the councils at the moment. I know, for example, there's a lot of calling on younger people to actually join it from all political parties at the moment for the new elections. And I know a few of them have got, and it doesn't matter what party, have got history and heritage in their mind. So something like this, I think we could see more protection of as we see a new generation of people come in.
Without being political, I would suggest Bridgend Independence, because they've got a heart for historic Bridgends. Apart from improving what's there now, they've also people who become independents because they were fed up a party political ideation and decided, right, okay, why are you pulling that down? Oh, it's got to come down. Well, can't you rescue it? So I know the local council for the Oldcastle area, which covers that building. Yeah,
I think that's something that I started to notice even doing college work when I was younger. The fact that we're going, I saw it as more almost presidential, where people vote on the individual and how they react with the community, rather than the party. We see people, for example, they vote for individuals that aren't representative to their views, but it's the individual that's worked for their community. So I think that's what people need to start looking into more, rather than focusing on the parties, maybe focus on your beliefs and what you want to stand up for. And I think heritage is definitely the way to go.
Oh, yes.
Especially because we're seeing so much of our history being lost. And I was talking to someone on the train who was from Lampeter University, who was talking about the interest they had in Wales and the archaeology of Wales. And Wales, as a topic in history and archaeology, is really starting to come back up in popularity, and a lot more interpretations getting brought into it, which I love. So we'll start to see more of that, and I think we'll start to see, hopefully, fingers crossed, I might be very, very optimistic, but see a better preservation and protection of our history and our heritage. So fingers crossed for that.
It's part of the curriculum now.
I think they're bringing it in next year, but they want to look at everything from a Welsh perspective.
Getting hold of the textbook.
Yes, that's what I want to do. So I'm wondering, because I know a lot of people nowadays is a rise in people learning from at home. So I'm wondering if you could try and access it online, or try and buy it in some sort of way, so you can have a look, because I don't think they're going to keep it a secret.
No.
If not, I'll go and have a little bit of digging myself, see if I can get down to the bottom of it, because I am intrigued. But yes, thank you for that, Del. Bill, any news from you?
Not really, no. Had a quiet Christmas. There's been a few programs on TV recently, and they're Digging for Britain.
Yeah, David Attenborough will be Mammoths.
Yeah, the Mammoth and other bits and pieces, but nothing.
Time Team's back,
to
isn't
shout
it?
about, So nothing really exciting.
I did.
Time Team is back. Dal is on YouTube for free as well, so you can watch it. Yeah. What was you going to say, Anne?
Oh, there was two. So I don't usually watch many programs, but there was two good ones on BBC 4 on Tuesday night, and it was it was called Shipwrecks. I expect maybe somebody's watched it, but he's a historian, and he's been on before. He's done loads of different programs, but it's all about shipwrecks, and they did the Spanish Armada, and the way they escaped, and how the shipwrecks, around the Irish coast and that was really good. And then there was a time watch on afterwards. I don't know whether you've seen it, but it was of the Great Flood, the Great
Oh, yes, I've heard about that.
Bristol Channel, and it was really good, because you saw the historian who was being involved with it, right from quite well, you know, I mean, the last 20, 30 years, 40 years maybe. It was just, yeah, it was interesting because it took you to it was docudrama almost, you know, as it took you to the places and good caricature, cartoons and things of people, you know, drowning and that.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. It's horrible, obviously, the scenes. But I might watch that because I've heard that a few times now and it sounds really interesting.
It was worth it because I think the only one I've seen is the one where you just got that picture of, you know, the people drowning on, you know, a marsh field or somewhere. And then, but this had, you know, like a documentary in it as well, and a historian, and it was very good. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Anne. My piece of news is something that is, it's a bit of mystery, and I think is taking the media by storm at the moment because of a bit of mystery, but it's to do with Richard III and his nephews in the Tower of London. There's evidence to suggest that they didn't die there, and they didn't kill them, and one of them might have ended up in Cornwall. But the things with that at the moment are developing quite fast. So I'm hopefully just going to watch it all pan out and then have my own opinion on it at the end. So far, it seems fantastic that someone has actually come together with other experts and have really worked this out. I'll start into it now. What is it, Phil?
Just one question. What are you talking about? I missed it.
Richard III.
Oh, Richard III. Okay.
And that his, not today's lecture, obviously, but my news is Richard III and his nephews. They think that they didn't die there, that they ended up leaving, but had false names, and one of them ended up in Cornwall. And there's a building that they talk about where there's a head, and they think is one of them. So I guess stuck into it now. Yeah. And I'll share screen. If you hear grumpy children in the background, it'll be 2 seconds. I know my sisters have just walked in, and their first day back at school, and it always hits them for 6. So today is an introduction to the prehistoric period. I'm going to tell you the things that me and Karl will be talking about for the next year, what we'll be getting a taste of, and the discussions that we'll have in front of us. But the introduction is important with any, I think, any beginning of anything, because you need to know what you're looking at, what we're going to be talking about, get a taste of what's going to happen in the next year. And a lot of people last year liked the prehistoric lectures, and we've decided to do a prehistoric lecture going throughout time of the prehistory and try and get a sense of what's going on, and hopefully bring awareness to some people, possibly as we're live online, people who are watching, to possibly change their opinion of the prehistoric period and not go towards what we're seeing in front of us now. This is something that you see on the internet, where they believe that prehistory is a time before people invented a writing system, and I agree with that. But I'm also going to argue as well how there is evidence of markings or art that, in my eyes, would argue that even though it was prehistoric, that's a type of writing system that they knew, that they understood, and so it's not as clear cut as that. I'll also be looking at how there's this idea that people lived in caves, there was no cities or central governments, and there's no complex inventions. We almost have this idea that the prehistoric period is backwards, and I do think this is because people feel disconnected from people in the prehistoric period. They don't see themselves as see them as human, they see them as bones and people that lived way before us. And I think what people are trying to do now, especially my generation going into academia, they're looking at the human aspect, rather than looking at this as evidence of just life years and years ago and everything's a ritual and everyone is backwards, that they're not advanced. They can't create these fantastic things or have these complex ways of thinking because they're backwards. And I think when you look at it as individuals, you start to realize that that's not true, that this has been dominated by the media. And I kind of think of, this is a crazy concept, and don't necessarily 100% believe in it, but I just thought it was a nice concept either way. There's something on YouTube called, it's a little short film called The Egg, and it's about an individual who's moved on to the afterlife, and they're greeted by this individual who's a higher form. And basically, at the end of everyone's life, they go to this place, this individual greets them, and they learn that they've lived every single life on Earth, all at different times. So at one point you could be in 2022, and then you could go 30,000 years into the past. And it was just this idea, really, that the moral of the story of that film was just to be nice to everyone else, because if you're not, you're going to hurt yourself. But I looked at this as maybe looking at history. If by that theory, you are going to have people who are more skilled, possibly have a different way of thinking in the past, very ahead of his time. And then you might have people in the future that it's almost like they're living in the past. And what I'm trying to get here is that people in society are going to have their own talents, and there's going to be people good at some things and some people it doesn't come natural to them. And I think when you look at prehistoric society, there is always going to be an individual that finds something out just by thinking, just by messing around with things, just by trial and error. And I think that just shows how the intelligence of humanity has always been with us and has allowed us to develop to where we are today. And I agree with Karl with this. I don't really like looking at things and saying it's ritualistic, that saying that these people only lived for religion. When you see this, see people depicted in the prehistoric period, you always see it as that they are people that was obsessed with religion, and that's all that they dealt with. And that's not true, because if it was all about religion, how would they farm? How would they grow crops? How would they have connections with each other to have a sense of community, but not just that, to live, to survive, and also to procreate as well? I think it's important. And I think when you look at the archaeology, sometimes you see things that really melt your heart, because you see humanity has always been with us. And I think that's part of our nature as humans, to be curious, to always want to develop, that humanity in itself has never changed. It's just certain aspects of humanity has obviously come down to nurture, where we've had things from our environment affect us. And I think what I want to do for the next year is really look at the prehistoric period as a time of people like us living, just with different circumstances, and just looking at this as a period where they had religion. They wouldn't have time for religion all day, every day. We're quite busy nowadays. Some people don't really have time for some of their things in the day, because even though we have things to do our washing, things to wash our dishes, we can order food online, we can have our shopping delivered to us online, don't have to go shopping for clothes, that everything's on the phone. Yes, it seems more convenient and more easier, but we're still busy, too busy to actually take some time out of our day for something like that. And especially in the prehistoric period, this is a time in history where people definitely didn't have anything convenient for them, and so they had to constantly keep being busy. And I just want to look, I think with me, although I'll be looking at things the same as Karl throughout the prehistoric period, I'll also put some interesting ways of looking at things in front of us as well throughout the year. I see quite a few things online, and it does make sense. There was one comment that I saw on a discussion about the prehistoric period, and it was a student at Cambridge, and they were talking to their professor, and they had a picture of a bone that had 28 incisions carved into it, and she said this was man's first attempt at creating a calendar. And he kind of changed it on to his head. He said that my question to you is, what man needs to mark 28 days? I would suggest to you that is the woman's first attempt at a calendar. And I think it's just, when you look at things like that, it might be simple, but it can really change your aspect on how you look at things as well. So that's just little taste of what I'll be looking at. And even down to the human aspect, I think the human aspect of prehistoric Britain and any other time period is important, simply because it's important because it tells us more about the people. It allows us to have this connection, but it's important to keep in every step of the process. There's someone that I also saw on another forum that talks about when they were excavating a prehistoric site in the eastern part of the world, they found remains, and as they were digging the remains from the ground, they were talking to the remains and they were singing to the remains. And they said that that was their way of keeping the respect for the remains as they were writing their history again, giving them an identity, giving them a story. And they said the reason why they were singing and talking to them was because this individual hasn't seen anyone that remembers them for thousands of years. And this is the first time that they've had an interaction with someone in that time. And so to greet them with love and care, and to even talk to them like a friend, was part of that humanity aspect, I think, from present day interacting with the prehistoric period is a nice way of doing it. And I think is all about the respect as well. I think instead of looking at them as burial number 5, look at them as individuals, so they had lives and stories as well. But I just wanted to show you some images here of what the prehistoric period is depicted like. And you always see people in caves. There's always that image of someone sat around a fire. And even down to horrible histories. I love horrible histories. In fact, for Christmas, I had a horrible histories board game, and I've played it about thousands of times now. It's got to a point where I've started to know what questions are what, and a little bit of an obsession, I think, over the Christmas period. But when you look at how they depict the prehistoric period, it does fall into that popular culture portrayal of the Stone Age, the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, where the people are very dumb. They don't have the advancement that we do. And I think just because we have all of that, what's to say that I think intelligence, you either have it or you don't. And so I think we always had intelligence for people like this. And in fact, sometimes I think with things being so convenient to us today, it's hard for you to think as much. I'm guilty of it, where I'm just rather just go and research something rather than thinking for myself. And I know a lot of people in uni have probably done the same thing. But these people didn't have that at their fingertips. They had to think for themselves. They had to find out for themselves. And I think they're amazing, these people in the past, for doing that, because they paved way for us to be so advanced. And the portrayals of it really, they do really, you know, you see the different individuals, you can really try and relate with them and see what their landscape's like. It's always some sort of cave in the background. But I think this is just what we see most of the time when people think of the prehistoric period. I think this is what they see. And I want to look further, as this image is focused on them making fire. What about the cave art in the background? And a lot of people will look at cave art and dismiss it as looking very childish or rubbish, not the same as today. But that was fantastic art at of his time. And so we need to look at that as if we're in the past, and have appreciation and admire what they've left, because that's their way of writing their history, in my eyes, documenting things, telling their story. And we have so much evidence of rock art that is becoming more available today, even down to the Gower, for example. That has some fantastic example of rock art there, even quite recently, to think that this is the oldest in Britain. And we'll look at that. I think if I have a quick look in here quickly, where is it gone? Oh, there it is in the Gower. I don't know if you can see it. The red lines that's been put on this is actually atrocious, but it's believed that this is meant to represent the antlers of a reindeer. Excuse my awful drawing, but this is thought to be the antlers of the reindeer, and then this is the neck and the body. And this is what that they found in the Gower, and I think this has sort of encouraged people more to look into caves and try and see what they can find out. Personally, with me, that looks more like a helicopter. That's awful. Apologies, I haven't got my glasses, but I will say something. I've got big respect for anyone that's willing to go in a cave. I think I've watched too many horror films, and I'm scared of what could be lurking around the corner. Not so much getting stuck in there, but just because it'd be nice to have a break, but it would just be what's lurking in there. But I just think it's so mysterious how they find this, and it just makes you wonder how they would have walked there and what sort of things would have gone on with people in their community as they're walking back to their cave, or what was the reason behind cave art like this. And I personally think this is just documenting what they've seen around them, and I think cave art really shows you how diverse the prehistoric period is in terms of animals, in terms of plants, in terms of people, and how the movement of people brings this new idea in the prehistoric period. And I think the reason why people get iffy about the prehistoric period, because the whole time I was in uni, never met one person that looked at the prehistoric period. I don't think I even met anyone in uni that was focusing on the prehistoric period in the history department. It was almost like people shied away from this time period because they didn't have there is evidence of the prehistoric period, but there's no definite evidence of the prehistoric period in terms of lots of it, rich evidence. What we do have is fantastic. We don't have loads of models, and I think that really scares historians from talking about it, because they panic. They think, we need so much more evidence. And I think historians, especially ones that look at the modern period of history, they kind of get so greedy with documents that when they're presented with a time period like this, they can't cope and their brain glitches. But looking at this and trying to step out of a box that you've been told to put yourself in by a lot of if you go to education, just step out and try and put yourself in that time period and try and see them as individuals, human beings. And if I go through, going back a minute, just because we are going to obviously look at Star and Doggerland, for example, but this is depictions throughout time that we'll get into. So if I can get my... there it is. So if we have a look at now, we'll have a break after this, but we'll get back into all of it and really get down to the nitty-gritty bits of why dating is so important. But here we have a timeline, and I think that it's important to just go through that timeline just to remind everyone about it, because if you're anything like me, sometimes things can get a little bit messy in your head and you almost get a bit confused. And I think this is just a way to understand what people are talking about, get a sense of what time periods and what's going on where. And there's always an issue with when things start and when things end. Different timelines can have different dates on there because people can't really seem to agree on some things. And this isn't a problem with the fact that it's prehistoric. We see this with the medieval period as well. We can definitely pinpoint it more closer to our time. But the medieval period, that really boggles people's minds. I remember at the beginning of my MA course, we had a paper about what is medieval. and we had to talk about, I talked about the beginning, there was a discussion about the beginning and the ending as well. And the beginning, some people thought it was the 400s, some thought it was the 500s, some people thought the ending was in the 1400s, some people thought the ending was in the 1500s. A lot of people seem to have different opinions, and definitely when you go to different parts of the world, you are going to have different time periods as well. So, for example, when we looked at New Zealand, that was still in its prehistoric period while we were all in our medieval period. And it really does confuse you, I think, when you look at it in that way, because it's hard to get that around your head. But I think it just shows the level of development of areas and how eventually we all just came into this present day. But it's definitely interesting to look at. But as you can see here, we have the lower Paleolithic period, which is thought to go to about 300,000 years ago. And then you have the middle Paleolithic, which goes right up until 50,000 years ago. And then you have the upper Paleolithic, which is up to 11,000 years ago. And I think this is where we start to see things really happening in Britain around about this time, when we go from 12,000 right up until obviously the Roman invasion. And this is just important, I think, for discussion, just to have that there, so we know where we're talking about, when, rough time dates, and well, just trying to get to grips with all of this, really. And we'll even talk about artifacts like this has helped us date as well, try and find how old the history is in our time periods. And I think depending on where you go, again, they have different names and different classifications of time periods as well. It's based on what affects them. But this is evidence here of the Red Lady of Pavlan cave, which we will talk about later on in the lectures. And it was bones and artifacts of an individual. And a lot of people have connected this to a ritualistic sort of aspect. And a lot of people have argued about this. But this was showing evidence 30,000 years ago. But when you go to the Gower, for example, 200 years ago, archaeologists were able to create a picture that was quite controversial at the time, of the prehistory in the Gower, and how this was showing evidence of history that was quite old for Britain. But I think what we have to do here is put the meat on the bones, and what people panic about is the fact that there's not enough bones to put the meat on. But you have to struggle through it, have a lot of discussions, possibly dry your brain to a point where it feels like mush. But you definitely see how when we get to even just down to the archaeology, we start to sort of struggle when we get to around about this time period in the middle of the Upper Paleolithic, just because archaeology gets quite sparse, and obviously as we get further on down there's a lacking of archaeology, so it gets even more harder to understand. And I think this is just when you have to have your mind run wild and just put yourself into that time period. I really do hate looking at people at this time as seen as people that they were constantly fighting each other, that was looking out for bloodshed, and they were barbaric. Well, you wouldn't be able to survive if that was the case, if you were constantly fighting and killing. I definitely think this was people at a time where things were a lot simpler in some sort of way. They were more focused on just living. And one thing I thought was quite interesting, again, just turning on our heads on just interesting facts, was that I found that women, when it came to hunter-gatherer periods of time, was that women were actually bringing more of the calorie intake through gathering together all different types of berries, etc., whereas the men were actually not bringing as much calories because they were too busy chasing the animals, because they were so hard to get. And you've got to understand that why would you have time for religion if you're so focused on getting a mammoth or something to ensure that you could have food when you get home, because that would be a difficult task. And so again, it does make you think that a lot more work of definitely had to be put on to members of the community to ensure that they survive. But again, it isn't just about food or fighting or religion. I think we also got to look at the aspect of how just humans are. I'd like to look at just the little aspects of our history that really tells you about the individual, because we will get to Otzi the Iceman at one point, and just even looking at that as an individual, and the tattoos there, which are very perfect in terms of the preservation. Just look at that individual and what do those tattoos tell you about this individual. But this time period is definitely something fantastic, because we're finding a lot of prehistoric history that's coming from this movement of people as well. And we can track it just coming from Africa. It's going all the way then to the Mediterranean basin, and then to Italy, and then to the Alps and to the Orkney Isles. And you definitely see how people go through France as well, and they end up in Cornwall and Wales and then Ireland. And this is due to the fact that before any ice was melting, before the ice melts, there was land, people can move freely, but with the ice melting, it meant that water was also rising. And I think this sort of gave humans this innate fear of water as well. Water disconnected them from other communities in Europe. Water also disconnected people in Britain from their families, from animals, from a way of life they used to know. And I think looking at the past in terms of that as well, I think we definitely hold on, and even just down to fight or flight, we still have that in us. And I think we're still the same people, just living in a modern world. So I think, like I said, we don't have time for religion today. What would make you think that they had time for religion back then? So I think what we need to look at is just, obviously today we'll be looking at time periods, but I think more of a focus on the individuals of the humans and try and relate to them as much as we can to get as much information. We even look at North Wales, for example. There's lots of evidence in their caves that tell us a lot about the prehistory, and because we're finding things in caves doesn't mean that that's where they were residing. It could have been a place where they came together as a community. Like I said, we're very busy people, but we have at least a big celebration a year where there's Christmas. And I'm sure there was communities that had done this with their loved ones as well, to get together. But I think, again, the Paleolithic period, when we look at this, we look at Neanderthals as well. And last year, Neanderthals, there was constantly news headlines was coming out. Neanderthals can talk. Neanderthals are the first to do this. Neanderthals can do that. And I think we're seeing how they can do so much. Then why did they become extinct? And I think they interbred, that they didn't become extinct. They just moved on. But I know that looking at all this can be really mind-boggling sometimes. So I think looking back and trying to get a sense, that'll be the way we'll go. And just with the James Dyer books that we'll be getting and looking at, that'll help us have an idea of the changes throughout opinion, because that book is quite old now. So it'd be quite interesting to see how opinions have changed over time. And what we'll do now is that we'll go for a break, and then next thing we'll do is look at age systems, how this relates to the timeline, and how that's an issue with artifacts as well and the study. And we'll also just be having another little conversation about what's to come ahead, and really try and get an understanding, the basic understandings, to move on to a fantastic year of other fantastic topics. So if I stop share, does it want to work now? Here you go. So Bill, is there anything that you'd like to ask or add before we go on the break?
No, I think the point you're making is very valid, that we need to change our way of thinking about early man. And one aspect of the development of early man through the different phases, up to Homo sapiens, is the concentration on the physical development and not much on the mental development. So I would suggest, certainly since the Mesolithic period, there's been no actually great improvement in intelligence levels from then to now. I think they were just intelligent in the Neolithic, certainly, Mesolithic, even Paleolithic, because they had to survive. And the main tools they had, they were their hands and their brains, you know. So they were intelligent people who have a very...
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
They did, you know, and you have to sort of take your hat off to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
You get the end
Yeah.
product. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to talk more about that as well, the mental development of individuals. But that'd be quite interesting to look at that. I think is a nice niche topic as well to actually slip into our lectures.
Well,
so thank you, Bill. And you were going to say something?
Yeah, it was just that other that most important factor when you're going through from prehistory to, you know, later times, is the population. You know, you kind of, people behave differently depending on the population. So as the population was very sparse, you know, and maybe only small groups of people, then you can see as we progress, their brain has to become more, you know, become more intelligent, because they have to adapt to a different situation with more threats, more, you know, and yeah, until we had education, you know, which didn't come in until Victorian times. We never really challenged the brain that much of ordinary people, you know. So I think it's like right and left side of the brain, you know.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting, yeah, because you can trace that in a way, you know, how that's being used, you know, by earlier people, and how it starts to develop, you know.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Anne. Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to look at that as well. And I think there's always that habit of looking at any time period and seeing it as barbaric and that they have no empathy. And I do think there's evidence that people in the past, especially the prehistoric period, did have the same amount of empathy as we do. I remember when I started my lectures for medicine last year, we looked at the prehistoric period in terms of medicine, and that there was an individual that was disabled. I think they were paralysed from the waist down, and just looking at the individual, that you know that they wouldn't have been able to survive to a very high age, but they did, because it was evidence of the community caring for that individual, because they loved that individual. And I think that's something that we'll also look at, this human aspect of it, that again, even though it's a different time period, we still have that in us, empathy. And that's the one most beautiful thing that I think of humans in history as well, especially when we go to the prehistoric period. I think it's a time period really that just melts my heart, because you see the human individual at its most vulnerable, but at its most beautiful as well. So I'll also ask Del, is there anything that you'd like to add, or just even ask before we go on a break?
Going to be really interested when you come on to do the Neanderthals and possibly Denisovans as well, because they're a more recent sort of discovery, all within the same sort of time period, coexisting with, well, whether they're modern Homo sapiens or pre-Homo sapiens, if you know what I mean. But yeah, because the Neanderthals, who were primarily in Europe and the Middle East, they'd bigger brains than us. So, you know, they'd survived, well, they'd existed a lot longer than us.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, I know there's a certain percentage of Neanderthal genes within our genes. And it's sort of those sort of links, because that really interests me, especially the change from looking at them from being these shambling cavemen. Then all of a sudden, with recent, you know, developments, they've discovered that they were actually quite intelligent.
Yeah.
And
Cadart,
they did mate with us.
yes.
Yeah.
So they can't be that bad
I'm going to
looking.
put some more coffee in my tea. It's not very nice.
Thank you,
Yeah,
guys.
yeah, that's fine. And get a cuppa. Warm up if you're cold like me.
This is the trouble, isn't it? The heating goes off in the afternoon in our house.
Yeah, well, you can't have it on all the time, can you? And so you have to make do without it for about a couple of hours and then put it back on. See you guys in a bit. We won't be long. Just I'm going to get a cuppa.
Right.
Yes.
B-shares, isn't it? Yeah, they were B-shares. Right, B-shares they were. B-shares, right. Yeah. Oh, it's A-shares, isn't it? Yeah, B-shares. What about A-shares then? That's A-shares, isn't it?
Look out.
That's ridiculous. 1903.
No.
Oh.
Just looking, somebody's come out and gone into the. Oh, let me turn the volume off.
I've got the beach sorted out.
Hi everyone, is everyone there?
Yep, apart from that.
I think everyone apart from Anne. We'll give her a quick minute while I just get my notes back up again. Ended up making a lot today for an introduction, which believe it or not,
Oh, yeah.
This is the warmest place in my house. By the I got a radiator at the back of me.
Oh,
It's not on, but it's got a bit of retaining heat. It's
Yeah.
warm, it's warm. Oh yeah.
I've got a long hot water bottle, not a usual one. It's like a really long one. Nobody holds it like that over my shoulder, and it keeps. Or you can just
that's
cross your body.
nice. Yeah.
Dog seems to love it, so yeah.
Yeah, I know people are using blankets more now.
Yeah, I've got that one of those blankets you can put your feet in and then your arms, and there's a pocket for pens or your phone, because I forget things. But yeah, it's definitely I love my blankets and things all cushy, especially in this weather when you feel nice and warm. It's absolutely lovely, and it does make me think of. I don't think I could have lived at the prehistoric people.
Oh God!
I know.
I mean, yeah, we must be
pampered now. I think
it might make us appreciate what we've got going over the prehistory.
Yeah. So we'll go back into sharing screen. Like I said, it's an introduction today. So if any of you have anything to throw up to discuss, then don't be afraid to as well. So if I just get the last of my notes. I've got to learn to close tabs. I've got too many of them open, and then I wonder why it's so difficult to navigate. So back onto my Google Docs, that's perfect. So even just looking at things online, you can get given timelines. For example, there's a timeline here that we look at where it sort of shows that the Stone Age is actually divided. We have Mesolithic, Neolithic, Paleolithic, for example, as well. There's so much going on in this time period, we couldn't just brand it under the same one. And just looking at this timeline as well, I like looking at timelines. You see some quirky ones, like this one's a nice one to just look at as well. Can just be really helpful to just see how things are divided. And I think that's why I get frustrated sometimes when people just say prehistoric and they don't expand, or they'll say a year and you've got to try and think of where it goes. But things like this, language like this, Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, allows us to pinpoint further parts of the Stone Age, and even Bronze Age and Iron Age helps us as well. And you always have about, because again, you have these boundaries. Things just didn't change overnight. It didn't just hit 7 p.m. on the 14th of October. It was just gradual over time. And we definitely see how this is definitely an interesting one. I think just seeing how life starts and how people develop is definitely one to look at, and just look at the development in tools and things that are being made and pottery. And I even think that, again, this just shows how sophisticated that human aspect of individuals to want to make things, own things, and have things that are important to them. But looking at this one again, you definitely see how the last ice age dates to around about 12 KYA. And you see how this moves on further. And you see how here we have Star Car, for example, which is depicted here. This is the oldest one that's mentioned here is a lakeside settlement in North Yorkshire. And it has the earliest house in Britain. And it was permanently inhabited, and people would wear red antlers for ceremonies. But does it have to be ceremonies? Could the colour not just mean that family, that settlement, that community? You definitely have your mind really going with all of this as well. And then farming starts to develop as well in the Mesolithic period. You definitely see how the domestication of wheat and barley and sheep starts to come about, and just also domesticating themselves, how to be humans, how to not act on urges. And I think, again, this is another thing that we can relate back to the past, the prehistoric period, is our urges. We always have it in us. And someone with anxiety, I think you get told this quite often, that I learned to manage my anxiety, and they always say is fight or flight, because it is to keep out for danger. And you can definitely see how we're the same, because we have the same urges. It was in us to actually keep out for danger. And it is something that we'll always have with us throughout time. And really, I think it just shows how these people were more in tune with their environment, more in tune with themselves, and that they were able to survive based on that. We also have teepee-like houses as well. That's found in Northumberland, which is dating around about 7,600 BC. And you definitely see how Norway has a lot of archaeology showing up, and we definitely see how Doggerland was important. And I do have it put in this as well, Doggerland, what the land looked like, how we were able to connect with Europe, how people ended in places. And we do eventually see how people settle in Orkneys, in Ireland, in the Shetlands, in the Hebrides as well, just from the water connecting. But it is this fear of water, I think, does come from the fact that we've been so split up from certain parts of our society as well. And I think what we're looking at here is how there's a change in not just people, but their landscape, and their landscape can help people develop and also change and build up survival skills that we still have today. So Doggerland, as you can see from here, is here. And all that's Doggerland Bank, but it's all this area as well. That was an awful drawing. But we'll be looking at that in the future as well. I'm looking at the archaeology, and I think it's definitely an interesting one. Even looking at this map, when the ice did melt and you could still freely walk, there was still ice sheets in places like this, places over here as well. You definitely see eventually how everything flooded over, and we could no longer get to these places. But I think it just shows the movement of people, how they're able to adapt and move on and carry on surviving. So a lot of people seem to think that the prehistoric period in England, for example, goes up to the 43 AD. And it was a time before written records, like I said. It's a period of human history. And I think it's only fair to look at the humans. So the earliest known humans to arrive in Britain was around about 900,000 years ago. And this is evidence from English heritage, I believe. Prehistory stretches until the Roman invasion. So over this time, lands underwent huge climatic, societal, political, technological, and geological changes, which affected us as humans. So when looking at artifacts discovered by archaeologists, the henges, the hill forts, the burial sites, the cave art, you definitely see how the visible landscape that we have in front of us today it gives us these fascinating and interesting glimpses into the lives of people of prehistoric Britain. So when you look at massive spans of time, archaeologists divide prehistory into three periods. Like I said, you have, let me move, there you go. Like I said, you've got the Stone Age, Bronze Age, and Iron Ages, and the Stone Age got divided further because it was such a big time period. So subdivisions, you have Old, Middle, and New Stone Ages, Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic. Paleolithic is quite big as well, so it has the lower, middle, and upper Paleolithic periods as well. But a lot of these terms seem to be old-fashioned by some archaeologists who just prefer more specific terms like beaker periods to reflect the subtle changes in society and culture and technology. But the old, broad chronological divisions are still useful today, and it is important to still talk about. So archaeologists, they use cutting edge technology to be able to find out more about the past, to be able to connect with the past further and to write our history. So when we look at recent archaeological finds, as well as new scientific techniques, we definitely see how the opinion and interpretation has been changed over years, sorry, not centuries. When we have things like radiocarbon dating, DNA, isotopic levels, pollen sequence analysis, we definitely see how there's an analysis of human and animal remains, chemical analysis of stone tools and pottery, new ways, like I said, radiocarbon dating. This allows us to have raise new questions and find out more about this fantastic period in Britain. You definitely see how in Bodmin Moor as well, in around about 3,500 to 2,500 BC. It's a well-preserved example of a portal dolmen, which is a type of monument that's specific to Cornwall. And you definitely see how we'll look at capstones and standing stones as well. And we definitely see how monuments start to come about more towards the later part of the Stone Age. But during this time, Britain wasn't an island, but a peninsula of European continent. And what is now the River Thames ran to the North Sea. It's the oldest human remains so far found in England, dated to around about 500,000 years ago. It had belonged to a 6-foot-tall man, the species Homo heidelbergensis. Oh gosh, it's such a big word. HEIDELBERGENSIS. So these were just shorter. Where we end up having evidence of shorter, stockier Neanderthals as well, visiting Britain later on, 300,000 to 35,000 years ago. And then you see how this is followed by these direct ancestors of modern humans. But Ice Age humans, they created the earliest known cave art in England, which we see with Creswell Crags in Derbyshire, which is 13,000 years old. We have hunter-gatherers then, as we get to this period around about 9,500 years ago, so around about here, to 4,000 years ago. You definitely see how this continuous human occupation of Britain, as the climate improves, the end of the last ice age ends, people in Britain, hunter-gatherers, they make use of the wild plants and the animals around them. And most of these people are probably, hello? Oh, most of these people are nomadic, looking at recent discoveries.
Bill.
Yes, sorry.
Sit down.
No, I had a phone call. I couldn't get off in, so I apologise.
It's all right.
You could take your sound off if you like.
Oh, you could hear me, could you?
Yeah.
Oh, right. So sorry.
It's all right, Bill. Looking at recent... Pardon me. Looking at recent discoveries of buildings, there is a suggestion of settled life in this time period. But when we get to around about 6,500 BC, you see how there's rising seas that inundated the land bridge between Europe and Britain, making Britain an island. So just like I showed with our map, it was 6,500 years ago when we start to see that, or around about that time. We definitely see how we get to the first farmers then, 400 years ago, where we start to see, so if we're looking on this map, for example, we're now around about here. So you see the first farming, first farmers, the most important development in human history. this is how we're able to survive. The farming was first introduced, like I said, 4,000 years ago. People are moving, they have new techniques, they're advanced, they've had trial and error, they've tested things out, they've learned for themselves, they know how to have farming now rather than hunting and gathering, because yes, that still brought food. Again, it wasn't enough sometimes, and so farming was much easier. But it definitely see how people brought techniques to the islands of farming must have been from Europe that travelled by boat. This is what English heritage seems to think anyway. But they farmed pulses and barley and wheat, and people relied on wild food and resources still. And rather than settle in one place, they moved around within territories. These territories were focused on great communal monuments. So some of them were gathering places. So it's almost like you have zones. You have the forbidden zones, like you can't go into our woods over there. There's bears, and they're going to kill us. They're going to kill you. So don't go over there. We don't go over in those zones. They're a no-go zone for our own safety. And then they say, oh, but we have zones here that we can go in, and they're also divided. You have zones of the living and zones of the dead, zones to meet up. Zones, I think, for also to actually come together, I think is also zones to live in, and also zones to also develop. And what I mean by that is there's obviously going to be areas where people just farm, but also where people are able to come up with these fantastic inventions we have throughout history. So you definitely see how these folk territories were focused on great communal monuments, how this was a society. And I think this is where we start to see the early stages, really, of a community and a settlement in some sort of way. But you definitely see how there's burial sites with impressive long barrows as well. And you have many stone-chambered tombs, such as Belas Knapp and Gloucestershire. You definitely see how West Kennet Long Barrow in Wiltshire, and you definitely see Wayland Smithy in Oxfordshire as well, and they show evidence of that. There is sacred landscapes then that come about around about 3,500 years ago to 2,300 years ago, and you see how there's types of monuments that appear in the middle and late Neolithic period that include timber circles like Woodhenge, and mounds such as Salisbury Hill in Wiltshire, and stone circles in Cumbria, and there's even earthwork henges found in Dorset as well. Henges and circles are sometimes combined together. The stone circles at Avebury and Stonehenge, which we will talk about, and I think it'd be nice to compare them. We won't look at Stanton Drew because we've looked at that quite recently, but to get them into it. And you can get a good sense of sacred landscapes as well, and try and see if they are sacred. Did they have a sacred purpose, or were they having a more practical purpose? We've talked about this with Stanton Drew, and it'd be interesting to see what everyone's opinion is on that, and especially with Stonehenge, the interpretation of it, with people saying that this was a structure that would have had timber on it and would have been like a big building of worship. That's quite interesting to look at. You definitely see how in this period there's a use for flint for tools and weapons being extracted at Grimes Grave in Norfolk as well, which is around about 2,600 to 2,200 BC. Hang on a minute, I just got to go and get something.
We've been there, haven't we, Bill?
We've been to Grimes Graves with Carl,
Yeah.
yes, we have.
And you went down, didn't you?
We went down to the workings underground, yes, we
Yeah.
did.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. And it was just like a lumpy, bumpy sort of marshy or grassy area, wasn't it?
Yeah, amazing.
And these holes in they went down
Oh, wow, that's
into these mines, you know.
Mm.
Flint mine. Flint mine, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh, I might look into that, Anne. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we get to the Bronze Age as well, and obviously then the Iron Age, and then the Roman invasion. But just looking at this quickly, Bronze Age, so around about 2,300 years ago, this is when we're starting to see, I think, a development in the craftsmanship and in the skill of the people. You see the first metal weapons and jewellery being begin to arrive in Britain with a new kind of pottery known as beaker. People were buried with these objects in individual graves, some of which were covered with round barrows. At first, the metal was used that was used was copper, but by 2200 BC, bronze, which was an alloy of copper and tin, was being worked in Britain. And this is marked a new time period. So I think this is a new sense of development for mankind. So you definitely see how in the early Bronze Age, some people were buried in rich graves with round barrows accompanied with these exotic imported goods. And these burials were found in an area around Stonehenge, but also in Yorkshire and Derbyshire as well. These burials were grouped in barrow cemeteries such as Flowerdown barrows, Hampshire, Winterbourne, Poor Lot barrows in Dorset. And these rich individuals signify a shift from this great Neolithic communal monument to something about an individual itself. And when we get to the middle and the late Bronze Age, landscapes are divided up by great field system, and people built great permanent roundhouses there, often grouped into villages such as Grimspound in Devon. Elsewhere, for competition for the land and the need for security prompted the construction of the earliest hill forts as well. But as we get to the Iron Age period, which is around about 800 BC, which is thought to be around about 50 AD in Britain, you have this early and middle Iron Age period where they've built bigger and more elaborate hill forts, like in Midham Castle in Dorset. And we begin to see weapons being made and tools being made out of iron now. And this evidence of ritual offerings of military equipment and fine metalwork suggests this dominance of a warrior and this high status warrior and the emergence of tribal territories. Again, you could argue against that. A lot of people seem to think that maybe this is put more into it. I think that maybe this wasn't ritual offerings to a warrior. Maybe this is someone who was a warrior and had great pride in it. And so they put this in their burial because they wanted this to forever be remembered, their identity still with them. And because you think about individuals that are buried today, I know a lot of people are buried with things that mean a lot to them. And then you have individuals like me that think about when they going to die in the future and think, I'd like to have loads of strange things in my coffin to really just throw archaeologists off if they found me. Like, I would put a crown on my head. I would make myself seem like a high status individual. But this could have been someone who was buried with things that meant a lot to them, that said a lot about their identity. And we know in the past, identity is shown by appearance. And this could be a way of showing that off. But when you look at the late Iron Age period, you see this, the first evidence of coinage and the emergence of tribal centres that we see in Stanwick Iron Age fortifications in North Yorkshire. During this period, Britain came into contact with the Roman world. And we see how the Iron Age goes. It doesn't just end when the Romans got here. Like, for example, it says 43 AD there, and I said 50 based on what I've looked at in my notes. The Iron Age period doesn't just abruptly end like that. It filters in. It all merges together. So I don't know what those scribbles were actually about that, but it merges in. It didn't just end. So we do see this evidence of Iron Age living into the Roman period, and I think that's because people still wanted to live the way that they lived, and because that's what they thought was easier. Yeah.
I mean, what would people think of something I've thought about, after looking at this chart, especially about the Iron Age? Okay, prehistory would have ended because history was able to be recorded at that point. But possibly argue that the Iron Age continued until the 19th century, because that was the breakthrough in steel and other stuff like that, and it was the basis of our modern day stuff.
Yeah, I like that in interpretation. I think this is the problem when we have, and this is what I was going to go into, so I think you put me right into that quite nicely. Thank you, Del. This is the issue with this type of dating system, is that, well, we see it in America, for example, Gettysburg. They started excavating there, and they started finding the arrowheads, and they were going, oh, this is clearly evidence of an earlier battle because they only used obsidian arrowheads in the past, and they didn't use it in the Civil War. And then they found out that, yes, they did. And I think when you look at things being set in certain areas, you can document things and archive them incorrectly. So when you get to the 1800s, so if I can get my notes on the free age system. So the 1800s is more of an interest, and one thing that I'll show you is, oh, I've still got a pen. So yes, I agree with what you're saying there, Del, is that it's almost like some periods never really ended, and I think that's again gives you more connection with these people. But these are depictions that we have of these individuals here, and this is what it was depicted like in the 1800s. And you definitely see how in the 1800s there's more of an understanding of the diverse, rich landscape, because there was a time where, well, the first invaders to Britain weren't people. It wasn't mammoths or animals, it was trees. And so we see how there's a rich landscape. But this free age system was inspired because people had an interest in all of this. So it was an individual, and he wanted to, he was in charge of dealing with a museum. So if I get his name up, this is the problem with writing too many notes sometimes. Basically, this individual, if I can find his name, I will do. This individual is Christian something. Basically, he was in charge of sorting out the archives in a museum that he was helping run. And he started to realise that there was in the prehistoric evidence, there was a lot of stone, and then there was a lot of going back to these timelines, wrong way. There was a lot of stone, there was a lot of then bronze and then iron, and he started putting them in piles like that. And he was looking at it and he was thinking, well, stone obviously came first, and then it was bronze, and then it was iron because of the way things are melted together to create iron, etc., and bronze. And this is how this individual came about all of this. And again, it's helpful because when we talk about this period, we can get an understanding just by talking. However, when you look at things like what you said, Del, that the Iron Age never really ended. It was, for example, we have evidence at Roman sites of flints still being used. But if you were going by the characteristic, this flint means Stone Age, then this individual in the 1800s would have put that flint in that Stone Age period, when really it came from the Romans. And I think what we see here is that it's not just boundaries, is how sometimes things still stick with us because it works. And so dating like this is perfect for discussion. Sometimes when you're archiving things, it can make it a little bit more difficult. And so this is, we'll give a quick background to this. This was something, like I said, in the 19th century. This was something that was revolutionary to understanding the history and archaeology of our past. So this was this breakthrough was shown that there was an advancement in our knowledge in the archaeology and the history of our prehistoric period of time. And for many centuries, the dominant understanding of prehistory in the West was based on the Bible. Hence why the world could only be 6,000 years old. And it does make me giggle. I've been quite open about this because I'm quite relaxed. I like a discussion, whether it be in philosophical or historical or political. And I've got members of my family that are Jehovah's Witnesses. And my mum told me quite recently, now I giggled because the confusion on my mother, it must have been so cruel on her, but she was told that, like we read here, that the world was that the world could only be 6,000 years ago, and so people were only about 4,000 years ago. My mum said that she went to go and see, they were told that there was no humans, no animals, and she was looking at the dinosaurs of China in an expedition after being told this as a child, and was really confused because they were looking at evidence of animals that were thousands and thousands, millions of years old. And she was confused because she was told that. And I think we definitely see how in the 1800s they have this breakthrough in the scientific community with archaeologists and historians that actually the world's much older than what we think. And so let's try and get to grips with that. And you definitely see how smelting and shaping tools have been one of the turning points that have been attributed to change in time periods. I think this reflects how we look at human development. We are interested in human development. How do we get where we are today? And also, how would we live in the past? But this is showing how we're able to have an understanding of the story of our past as well. So Europeans found stone artifacts. They thought they were created by lightning strikes in the ground. But in the late 17th century, following contact with indigenous peoples in Americas and in the South Pacific, European scholars began to realize that these stone artifacts were crafted by people that did not know how to work with metal yet. And this led to a debate and made people realize that no, this is actually evidence of early human life. This isn't just lightning, this is early human life. So how could Europeans have learned so much, but break away from the Bible as well? Because this must have been very difficult. You have the antiquarians, you definitely have naturalists and geologists that are coming to acknowledge both Earth and humanity were much older than what they thought they were. So when we get to this, this sort of set for a paradigm shift, the characteristics that we know based on what's been told by the Bible is all wrong. We're much older and we need to piece that together. So Christian Thomson, 1789 to 1865, come up with this free age system. He was not an academic, but he kept up with scientific discussions and he knew the Royal Commission's collection of artifacts better than anyone else. And so in 1819, he opened the Royal Museum of Nordic Antiquities. So it was Thomson that was forced to relocate his museum in 1832 to accommodate for the large crowds that it was attracting. People were now interested in their past. They wanted to see the evidence that suggested that people were much older than what they thought. And this required him to recognise the museum's artefacts, and he chose to arrange them according to chronological ages that he had come to believe that they were in: Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age. According to Thomson, first came the stone tools and the weapons, and then the bronze, and then finally iron. He published his dating scheme in 1837 in an essay that's titled Brief Outlook on the Monuments and Antiquities from the Nordic Past. Thomson was not the first person to propose a stone, bronze, and iron age sequence for humanity's past, but his proposal gained more traction than anyone else, and so he was the one that was accredited to this. This was due to his timing and the fact that his apprentice, Worsay, was later uncovered empirical evidence to support Thomson's theory here as well. So it was not immediately accepted by people, but this free age system changed Western conceptualization of prehistory forever and ever. And again, it helps with putting things in archives. It helps people with understanding when they talk about things. I've said we've gone through the Stone Age, but the Stone Age, the oldest human tools, according to Britannica, is 3.3 million years ago, meaning that the Stone Age must have begun before Homo sapiens existed. when most sources claim that the Stone Age lasted for around about 2 million years ago, is thought that to last right up until 3,000 years ago, but is often broken into Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, like I said. I think, again, is to talk about this development, this social complexity, the technological complexity that's coming with the development of society. And I think really what we need to look at this is just the development of our ancestors and our people, and how this is a society then that moves on to the Bronze Age, where you have these bronze tools, and then you move to the Iron Age, which again, like you said, most of this world is currently still in this age, is still argued. But I think it's fantastic when you look at this, how we have a changing landscape. This is very interesting. We're learning so much, and I think even though the evidence is sparse, I think the evidence is telling us a lot, really. And looking at things like the landscape and how it would change, it is interesting to see how this would have an effect on people. So what we'll be looking at, so this is a star car here as well, and there's some recent information that we have on this that would be really interesting to look into and discuss. I remember star car being my first class with Karl when I was 14, so it'd be nice to go and visit that back again and see what has changed from when I last talked about it. But this would be in our discussions. I know in our next meeting, for example, we're doing, I think it's Box Grove, and that's what we'll be focusing on. But we'll be doing it chronologically, and we'll be talking about how the evidence tells us so much, and how the boundaries differ, how we can have flint in different time periods, and how Bronze Age could be overlapping into Iron Age, and things like that. And I think some things are going to stick with people throughout society because they just worked. But we'll be looking at Orkney and Ireland and the Hebrides and Shetlands, and talk about the movement of people as well. Like me and Karl have said, we have this multi-dimensional theory that we didn't just come from Africa, we came from Asia as well, and we all came and interbred and mixed together, and that's how we're in this society today. But this is talking about a diverse society, how people are still working together and trying to figure things out in their landscape and trying to actually live and settle. And I think that's fantastic. And even just looking at the trees and the plants that were there, just see how different the landscape was to what we know it as today, and really dive into it. And also, again, like I've stressed on the human aspect of it, it'd be nice to look at the zones as well, and how society was able to be split up in the landscape, so people were able to live in a way that functioned well for them. I think we have to give credit to these people. They knew how to survive, they knew how to live. We have it so much easier nowadays, I think, whereas they had it much more difficult because they really didn't know what they were doing. They were learning as they were going, and they've done a fantastic job of it. And so looking and studying at their past, it's not just looking at individuals that we know nothing about. This is our ancestors. This has a connection with us. And so looking at them, I think we should have the respect and give the people of the past the attention, because there's no one alive to remember them today. So just like that individual who was excavating remains, we'll be looking at the past people and hopefully tell their story and give them the respect, and be their voice for them, and try and just get to grips with things as well. So I just realised that this is it is 25 past. So if I stop now and hope that this was a nice introduction to what we're going to learn. For example, we'll be talking about in the future rectangular and teepee houses in Northumberland as well. How the universal paradigm of dwellings of the prehistoric era has no real models. And I think, again, this shows with what Del was saying, how we could have things that overlap into different time periods that carry on today. Is to say something goes in this area and is from that time because that's what it is, doesn't really help. And we definitely see how when we interact, when the Western world interacted with the rest of the world, from the 1600s onwards, you definitely see how we have an understanding of archaeology and history just by talking to other communities that are in a different time period to us in their development. And it allows us all to learn and become closer to our past and our past landscape as well. And I think we can learn a lot from people from the past as well. They were able to survive and also live alongside nature, which is what I think we need to learn in this present day, is how to live next to nature. So we'll be looking at that. We'll also be looking at pottery, how that can tell you a lot about the individual, the showing off of their craftsmanship, what that means for society, and even down to coins. And even with coins, that's, to me, that would be a way of an advanced society that wasn't classed as prehistoric, but the Iron Age is. And so we'll be talking about all those things and all the things that will bump in the dark, as well, as Karl likes to say. And yeah, I will be in person next week, so we can all just meet up and talk through that way. But I hope today has been good enough. And one thing I also forgot to mention is cut marks. I think this is a way of writing, not writing that we know it as, but writing, again, it could mean families putting a mark there, and that's what they mean. It could tell us something more. In our Christmas recording, we talked about the oldest map that was created, thought to be from the Bronze Age period, and it's quite interesting. I think that's what we can connect with all of this, is that they're not just marks. Maybe a mark on a stone is a way of writing. They knew what it was, just like someone in the medieval period could go to a church, like I discussed yesterday, and see a mermaid comb their hair and know that that was a symbol of vanity and temptation. They could look at these cut marks and understand that this meant something else as well about their community and their society. So looking at art is another interesting way to look at it, because I think that's a way people were able to document their landscape around them, show you how diverse it is, also show you how they were able to survive, and tell us a history of them as well. And it's almost like they were documenting to pass on to younger generations. They'd never forget where they came from or how to do things as well. So if I stop share, and ask if Anne, is there anything that you'd like to ask or add?
Well, I just think it's going to be interesting going over it, and it's quite a tall order. But
yes,
you know, I think that's how I started originally. You know, with Karl, it was all prehistory, but of course, our attitudes and things must have changed since then, you know? And our concept of time, and that's what we're challenging, really, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Thank you. Del, anything that you'd like to ask or add?
No, not really. It's just like, all I want to say is I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. Looking at new eyes, fresh eyes.
Fresh, with new evidence as well.
Yeah. And the only thing is, I can't come next week because I'm having something on my hand removed.
Oh right, okay, Anne.
I won't be able to be there. So I will obviously, if you are coming next week, then I'll tell Robert.
Yeah. I will be.
And that sort of thing. I think you've got his phone number, haven't you?
I haven't, no.
Texting, he's better to be text, Robert.
Yeah.
Well, I think we text each other really better because, we know we've got each other's phone numbers and we can, or messenger. But so I think we miss Pat. I wish she was coming, but maybe when her husband picks up,
Yeah, that she can join us. I think she will soon. So just fingers crossed that her husband gets better and she can join us as well soon. So thank you,
the children
Anne.
Grow up.
Yeah, oh, bless her. I don't know how she does it. No. Bill, anything that you'd like to ask or add before we leave?
You made a comment earlier about evidence of tools being found millions of years ago. Way the Paleolithic. And what came to me, an image then of a modern day chimpanzee using a stick as a tool
Yeah.
to a termite munch, for instance. So if man was at that stage then, or the chimp stage, shall we say, all those millions of years ago, it shows that the intelligence there was there then, isn't it? And evolved from that point, Yeah. All right.
I'm sure it is, I'm sure people have studied it, but it would be fascinating to see why they haven't, developed, and we have,
Yeah.
Thank
you, Jess. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Bill, and thank you, Anne. I think it's almost like we get glimpses of the past in ourselves, like I said, with people with anxiety, that fight or flight. But it even reminded me of the other day, I was trying to get a clump of ice out the freezer, and I was actually sat down, bottom off the floor, but I had my feet down, so obviously I was crouched over, banging a bit of ice on the floor. My mum said I did look like a prehistoric person trying to break open some stone, and I thought, with the glimpses of the past.
If you're talking about people looking like a prehistoric person, just think of Carl earlier on. He's quite prehistoric in appearance at times.
He definitely wants to regress to that. I say regress, advance,
Advance at a higher level, a higher plane. And very carefree without any social media, I think, as well.
Yeah.
But thank you, everyone. I'll see you next week, and take care and look after yourselves.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
Thank you, Jess. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This is the end of the live. If any of you are interested, obviously hit subscribe and just watch our videos. We are live most of the time during the week. Either me or Carl presents a class, and we cover a wide range of things, and we like thinking out of the box. So if that's something that really interests you, really go and get stuck into it, have a look. And I will be back live Wednesday at 7 p.m. for you guys. We'll be looking at historic Wales. So something in Wales from the archaeological reports that I've found and gathered. So have a lovely evening, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll be back again soon. So like and subscribe, and really get that account that we're using out there, so people can also get involved in our discussions, and really enjoy the fantastic presenters, me and Carl, because of course we're fantastic. So take care, everyone, and I'll speak to you soon. Nosta.
Anyone, thanks for liking and watching, and please like and subscribe. Thanks for listening to Jessica's lecture.